All right, welcome back to the program. My guest is joining me right now, Patrick Okigbo III. He's the founding partner at Next Year. Hello, Patrick. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Nancy. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
I know.
It's been a while. Now, we have quite a lot to discuss. Let's get into it. Let's start with the Niger coup because we have two issues to discuss: the sit-at-home order and the Niger coup, the economics of the Niger coup. I know you've been watching what's been happening at least in the last few weeks or since July 26th. What's your view about the rising coup waves and the military uprisings in West Africa? At least Mali, I think in August 2020, May 2021, Guinea, September 2021, Burkina Faso, January and September 2020.
Guinea as well, although it failed.
Yes, Guinea. So what's your impression?
I mean, it's clear what's going on. Yeah. So for a while there were no coups in the region, and then all of a sudden, in 2 years, we've seen a lot of coups in these countries, and it's basically that the economies of these places are not working. You know, people are pushing back. The dividends of democracy, you know, that was promised to the populace, hasn't come through. You know, and as people suffer, you know, they're looking at what are the alternatives, and the military, you know, is always watching the mood. Right? The military looks at the mood, they feel that the people will support the coup if it happens, and they take a bet. And that's what we're seeing in the region. And the fear is that it may continue. It may continue unless there is a turnaround, you know, in the economic outlook for the region.
So your forecast is that it may continue among West African countries? Because we have 15 countries now.
Correct.
3 countries are, you know, within battling this right now. So for you to say it may continue, which other countries are you looking at? That's a negative prediction.
No, I mean, there's something called the neighborhood effect, right? And and that's what we've seen. You know, we've seen the neighborhood effect where in the Sahel, it's become acceptable, you know, unlike a few years ago when most social scientists thought that we have gotten, you know, away from coups. What we're seeing is that as the coups happen, and they succeed, then the neighborhood effect kicks in. You know, other countries are looking at it and saying, okay, maybe. So we need to be careful that it doesn't spread to other countries within the Sahel, within the West Africa region. And I think that's what motivated ECOWAS, you know, to say, enough of this, we need to push back. And they're hoping that by pushing back on Niger, you know, they can stop this trend from spreading to other countries.
Now, you talked about citizens of, citizens of these countries not being satisfied with what is happening in those countries, especially regarding the economies. Why do you think that is so? Because democracy is described as a government of the people, or by the people, of the people, and for the people. Why are we seeing seemingly hollow democracies around West Africa, democracies that are not giving good governance? Meanwhile, democracy is touted as the best form of government to give good governance, where we see other countries that have weak democracies or no democracies at all, and seemingly good governance, and the economy is doing well, people have high purchasing power and all of that. Perhaps, okay, let me just give you some examples. China, for example. Okay, like in Africa, okay, we can say like Seychelles, we can say some other countries like that. So what exactly is happening? Okay,
so let's start from the beginning. And there's a lot of social science research in this area. When people say democracy is the best form of government, they leave the latter part, because it was Winston Churchill that said this. And he said, of all the other things that we've tried, right? You know, so he's not saying that democracy is some kind of a magic bullet. He's saying it's flawed in its own way, but when you compare it to every other form of government, it's the best we have, right? So that's number one. Then some social science literature on this says, is there a direct link between democracy and development? You would think that the most democratic countries in the world would be the most developed, right? If there was that direct causation. But it's not.
It's not,
So if you look in Africa, Namibia, I think, is ranked highest in terms of a democracy index. But it's not it's not the most developed, right? If you look at the development, in terms of development in Africa, Seychelles, will be seen as one of the most developed, but they are not, in terms of the democracy ranking, ranked as high as Namibia. Now, if you go to places like China, for instance, and this is probably at the heart of, that great book, Why Nations Fail, by Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson, where they argued that, if you have like inclusive institutions, etc., that your government would do better, you develop better. And then the question is, what has happened in China? If China is one of the most illiberal governments, but they've exited almost 1 billion people from poverty in the last X number of years, they have become one of the biggest economies in the world. What's going on versus like an India that is the biggest democracy in the world, but is not the most developed. So there could be a correlation between democracy and development, but there is no causation. There is no causation. It's not like once you have democracy, then it's a magic tonic that means you're going to be developed. So yes, let's get it very clear. Democracy is the best form of government of every other thing that we've tried. But the fact that you have democracy does not mean that you would have development. You need to work hard to deliver development to the people. And there are different ways that you can drive development.
The opportunity cost of not having democracy right now in West Africa
is worse than, in my view, right? And it's open to debate. There are some people that would that would say, since we've tried democracy for X number of years and it hasn't worked, let's try something else, right?
And what could be something else?
I mean, most people who you talk to today would say military regimes, right? But I grew up under various military regimes in Nigeria. The millennials and the new generation guys who did not experience it may fantasize about the Thomas Sankara story, right? But we saw different military governments. I was 9 when the 1983, I was like 13, I guess, whatever I was, can't remember, 10, yeah? And we saw that. We saw the subsequent coups. We saw, the IBB coup. We saw all of that. And we know that why those governments did not work is that they're very illiberal. You can't have an opportunity to express yourself, right? However, there is also data that shows that Nigeria's GDP, if you look at GDP growth, saw some of the highest growths under people that came through the military. So we might fantasize, if you look at an Obasanjo, for instance, they delivered high growth. If you look at an IBB government, he delivered high growth. So there's a tendency to fantasize about the military. But we should never go there, right? There is the best form of military rule cannot be as good as a democracy where at least everybody has an opportunity to share their views.
This narrative has been on for a very long time. The military is not the best for us. The military guys should be in the barracks. We shouldn't see them. They should defend the territory of the country and all of that. Don't you think that is also giving impetus to democratic leaders for being incompetent and for being corrupt and all of that? Because if you take a look at what the Nigerians have said, a lot of their citizens were on the streets. They were happy. Some people will say, okay, it's not really about the economy that the Niger coupists really ousted Bazoum, but because of the insecurity that is coming into the land. But we've seen cases different in Mali as well as Burkina Faso and all of that. So isn't this also a signal coming in from democratic leaders? We've seen sit-tight leaders in Africa. I guess this is the only continent where we see a president sitting for over 30 years, changing the constitution to suit him. Take a look at Alassane Ouattara, for example. Alassane Ouattara, when he was campaigning many years ago, people like me were like, okay, I think that this guy will do well, looking at the antecedent, and not coming in after about 10 years, singing another song. I'm like, excuse me, and it's part of the ECOWAS leaders going for those meetings and saying, no. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I get your point. And let's get this straight. Every military coup is justified by the coupists. Yeah, they'll come up with arguments that make sense. If they don't blame it on corruption, they'll blame it on insecurity. So they will always have some reason that would appeal to the masses.
Are those reasons not justified? Niger, for example, is one of the poorest countries in the world. The 7th poorest, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Niger is the 7th biggest producer of uranium.
So we'll get to...
That should be very rich.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
I'm not holding a brief. I'm just saying...
devil's advocate.
They're playing devil's advocate between the two.
So the point is, any coupist, will come up with arguments that seem credible, right?
That seem credible are credible because they are facts.
So the fact is the economies are, the people are suffering. That's a fact. That's a fact. But the point is that military rule cannot get us to that promised land. It will never get us there. Yeah? And we don't even need a social experiment because we have lived through it. We have lived through in many African countries where you had military rule completely destroy the social fabric, completely destroy the economy. Have the politicians done better? Maybe not. Maybe not. The difference here is that when you have a liberal democracy, an opportunity to go to the polls and vote in and vote out, right? It's different from when a guy is sitting there with a gun and, under a military government, we cannot be having this conversation, right?
They'll be waiting for us outside.
We can't be having this conversation. And that's the reason why we must defend democracy. With all of its issues, with all the issues we face, we will keep working at it until we get it right. Yeah? So that's number one. However, the biggest inoculation against coups is not an ECOWAS threatening to oust the coupists, right? It is that the democratic governments, if they do not want to be ousted, must work for the people, and the people must see that they are working for them. That's the only way you guard yourself against a coup, right? If you think that you can put together an army that can fight these people, I don't see that happening, right? So if we do not want coups in Africa, our political leaders must realize that we're in that, actually there's a book by James Robinson and Acemoglu again, they call it the narrow corridor. And they say that development happens in a narrow corridor where the state and civil society is in a constant contestation. Yeah? In this instance, in Africa's case, it is now the state, civil society, and the military in a contestation. So when the political class realizes that you must do right by the people or else the military might step in, that could be the impetus for the politicians to do better.
Okay, let's take a look at ECOWAS's handling of these issues since, especially in Niger, since the president was ousted, as to, most recently what happened last week. How do you think that the way ECOWAS is handling it is okay? Bearing in mind now we've seen like the coupists trying to sing a new song and trying to make a U-turn. Also through the sanctions, and if we have that, we can put that on the screen, the economic sanctions on Niger. Earlier on, I did speak about Ghanaian traders are already saying, guys, food prices will go up in our country because of what is happening in Niger. Okay, that's it there. So let's take a look at some of those economic sanctions. And Niger has one of the largest World Bank portfolios in Africa. World Bank has already said, guys, we're halting, except for our special partnership, special private sector partnership. The U.S. has also announced that the $233 million is at risk. 40% of Niger's budget is gotten from foreign aid, which is about $2 billion. We also have seen sanctions from the Netherlands, France, ECOWAS also. In fact, $51 million, $51 million debts was cancelled. Was it? Yes, payment rather was cancelled, I think, just a few days ago. So Niger has faltered on that payment. So with all of these sanctions and some of the things that ECOWAS has also said, what do you think? Who
suffers? Who does the sanction affect the most?
The Nigerians.
The Nigerians.
And even the neighboring countries.
Correct. So if you're trying to get the military out and you put in economic sanctions and it is the people who suffer, what are you doing? What is ultimately going to happen? The people read the news, They know that their suffering has just increased because of economic sanctions coming from these countries. Are you not inadvertently proving the case for the coupists that these countries do not like the people?
So what would you rather these countries do and ECOWAS do? Because if they don't, because what countries really have is really sanctions, but I understand you.
What they should have done, what they can do, they should have done 10, 20 years ago.
Which is?
Grow the economy, improve the quality of life of the people. That's how you prevent a coup. At this point, the horse already left the stable. And that is why the Nigerians are not taking our president seriously. That's why they're not taking ECOWAS seriously. Because they know there's nothing you can really do. In fact, the Americans, who they should be afraid of, sent an envoy to Niger last week. The coupists refused to meet with her. Refused to meet with her. An American envoy. They're thumping their noses at everyone. Because they know you really can't do anything.
Now, don't you think that the sanctions are biting now, and that is why they are taking a U-turn in a very stylish way?
No, I agree that the sanctions will bite.
Because their people will begin to complain. Nigeria has cut electricity.
Complain against who? Are they complaining against the people they see as their saviors? Because remember, the mood now is that these military guys have come to save us from the imperialists, save us from our politicians, right? So who will the people complain against? They'll complain against Nigeria. They'll complain against ECOWAS, France, the United States. But they will still see the coupists as their saviors. Do you see the dilemma here?
So perhaps the coupists will also be selling the narrative. I told you guys, see, they don't like us.
Exactly.
See what they're doing.
But let's tighten our belts. Let's fight it. This is our opportunity to fight it. We got to win it this time.
But do you think that this economic sanctions has done anything at all?
No. Economic sanctions will always. In fact, if the World Bank pulls back their support, Niger is in trouble, right? Because they're dependent. The economy is dependent on the support that they get from the donors. No question about that. But do you know how badly the people will have to suffer before it will get to the point where it starts affecting the elite, the military elite? Half of the country would have died by then.
Now, let's talk about how this coup in Niger would impact Nigeria, or perhaps impacting us without knowing. Traders in the north have said, please, our traders are suffering over 2,000 trucks. I mentioned it earlier, 13 billion.
13 billion weekly.
Weekly.
Yeah.
So, just speak to me about what you think.
No. I mean, if we go back again and look at what the data says about the link between economic growth and the rise of terrorism, right? Then you know that we're in for another big one, right? So if the rise of Boko Haram, as some of the research that's come out lately, shows that you can tie it to the disappearance of Lake Chad, you can tie it to the economic downturn, then if the region, the northern part, 7 states in the north that have informal trade in food, livestock, etc., with Niger, if they lose 13 billion weekly in an economy that's already suffering, isn't that another recruitment campaign for people who will take to violent crime and maybe even terrorism? So it's going to affect the Nigerian economy. It's going to affect stability in the region. And that is why we need to be a bit more careful in the options we have in dealing with this coup. You see, I empathize with President Tinubu. I really empathize with him, right? Because he's playing a deck of cards with very little options. Right? Very little options. However, there are some decisions you make that can worsen the situation. I think that at this point, the option ECOWAS has is just to keep blustering. Yeah? It's just to keep, positioning like we're going to do something. But can they really get in there without it affecting some of the countries that are neighboring countries? Can they really get... So if you look at how much Nigeria spent on ECOMOG, for instance.
If Nigeria at this time can afford a war. Can we afford a war at this time?
How can we afford that?
Because during ECOMOG, at least I've listened to our former CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, Lucky Rabo, said We spent, I think, $8 billion in Liberia, if I'm not mistaken. Former High Commissioner of Sierra Leone said about $13 billion was spent. Liberia, Sierra Leone, and what's the third? Anyway, during the ECOMOG time.
Cote d'Ivoire,
yes, Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah.
$13 billion.
President Obasanjo said we spent $13 billion in prosecuting, that peacekeeping mission in those 3 countries, right? Peacekeeping mission, and then you go in to fight this coup when all the other countries, neighboring countries, where you have military rule, have said we do not recognize ECOWAS, right? So that means that once you get into Niger, you probably find yourself, also deploying soldiers in some of those other countries, right? Does the Nigerian economy today, have that kind of money, to prosecute a war like that? I don't think so. Yeah, there's nothing we've seen in the economic analysis that shows that is a good use of the very limited resources we have. And that's why I say I empathize with the president.
But Alassane Ouattara, Cote d'Ivoire's president, has said, it's not Nigeria that is fighting the war, it's ECOWAS. He actually said it last week, that the Nigerians should see it is not Nigeria against Niger, it is ECOWAS against Niger. So do you think that would also be in terms of, guys, let's put our firepower together in terms of funds? So it's not only the responsibility of Nigeria in terms of bringing out money, even though we don't have it.
That was a great response, that came very timely, because it was almost as if the ECOWAS leaders left President Tinubu out to dry, basically, and he was taking a lot of the flak on Niger. But if history is anything to go by, even back in rosier days, when ECOWAS through ECOMOG went in to provide peacekeeping in those countries, Nigeria pretty much bore the cost, almost 100% for ECOMOG, right? What do we see today that tells us that by the way, Nigeria's economy is probably about 40% of the whole of ECOWAS, right? Is it Ghana that's already in trouble that's going to put money in this? Or is it Cote d'Ivoire? Or who's going to put the money in, right? Except, for instance, if the players in this geopolitics, decide to get involved, i.e. the French and the Americans could decide to fund ECOWAS forces to fight because there is some geopolitical dynamics going on. The West on one side, Russia and China on the other side. Then the next question we'll ask ourselves is, do we want to be the staging ground for this geopolitical war? Is that what we want for the region? Yeah. If that is not what we want, then are there other alternative solutions that we can think of? Like I said, the horse already left the station, right? The stable. What we should be talking about now is how to improve on economic development in our countries so that the average West African does not see military rule as an alternative. For as long as they see military rule as an alternative, because politics is not delivering, then we're in trouble. And I think that's where we are right now. Okay,
a message is just coming in. Let me read it out to get your view. Insecurity can never be an excuse for removing a democratic government.
I agree.
Whose role is it to protect the people? Is it not the militaries?
I agree. See, so, and that's, I agree with this. That's what I said. The military rule should never be an option at all. Right? However, if the politicians feel that we have said that military rule should not be an option, the military should not come, they will continue behaving as if, they don't care what outcome the people, the people enjoy, right? They'll behave as if the economy works or it doesn't work, who cares, right? But if they know that the military could be an option, it will force the politicians to deliver better economic outcomes. And that's the surest insurance against a coup. It is not, you cannot hedge against a coup because you believe ECOWAS is going to come together and kick against them, or you believe America is going to put boots on ground. It's not going to happen, right?
Okay, let's go to the next conversation, because it seems we shouldn't dwell so much on this Niger. Perhaps we've even done that. The sit-at-home order in the southeast. Today is a Monday. Everyone is at home.
Maybe not.
Yes, no, maybe not, but at least for the last few months we've seen that.
Yeah.
And we've seen that this is an economic zone of the country in terms of commerce, in terms of trade. Trillions of naira have been lost. In some states, total sit at home. In some areas, some people go out, but there is fear.
Exactly.
Now the cost of fear is what we have seen in the last few weeks or in the past 1 year and a half. How do you think we should address this moving forward?
You know, it's a big problem, right? And some numbers here. There's a group called Dev East, right? They've funded some research on the economic cost of the sit-at-home in the southeast, and they looked at just the transportation sector. And the region loses about between 10 and 13 billion every naira every Monday that people do not come out. Just looking at the transportation space, they haven't looked at other things, right? Now, there's a second problem where you have children who now have 4 days out of 5 school days to catch up on what the rest of the country is spending 5 days studying, right? You have another bigger problem where the civil servants work for like 3 days a week. 3 days, right? Because Monday is sit at home, Friday is for burial, right? And because we run a burial economy in the East, by 10 o'clock, noon, everyone's gone for some burial or the other. So you have a region that's really running a 3-day work week. The impact is incredible. The economic impact is incredible. And that is why when MBS comes out with the next set of poverty numbers, you would see that a region that was doing quite well could have slumped into poverty, right? Okay. What can be done about it?
Yes, exactly.
I think the state governors have started working on this.
Do you think it was a little too late?
2 years?
Because they met in Enugu last week.
Yes.
Though there have been pockets of, telling the guys, no, our citizens come out, but they don't listen to them.
So I think we have a good crop of governors now, I think. Yeah.
What do you mean by good?
People who kind of understand the issues and are willing to engage the issues, right? So the meeting in Enugu last week was the public face that we saw, the 5 of them coming together, but I'm privy to some information that they have been meeting, and we haven't seen that kind of unity in the region in almost forever, right? So that's number one. Number two, you have people who can bring a bit of intellectual heft, to the issues, and who are bold to take a stand, so you must respect what the Enugu state governor has done. He's basically said, what is happening with Nnamdi Kanu may not be right. The courts said release him. But Mr. President, please respect what the courts have said, right? But whilst we're waiting for that to happen, everyone's got to go back to work. Yeah, and
some people are not listening to him. Many people are not listening to him because that's what I mentioned earlier, the cost of fear. Because people are saying, that's for the governor. Okay. You can see if I come out, there's a threat of injury or even death.
Exactly. So what has he done? Yeah, he's put more security presence, on the streets. So he's saying to people, we've thought about it. We understand where the conflicts, the vulnerable areas. We have, maxed up on police presence in those areas. You can come out. And I haven't called the people in Enugu today, but I suspect that more people are, on the streets today. Because again, the sentiment of the people, the sentiments are with the governor. The sentiments of the people are with the governor. They know that it's affecting them. They know it's affecting their kids. They know it's affecting their businesses.
So perhaps why people are not coming out every Monday is because, going back to what I said earlier, fear.
No, it's clearly fear.
Which is, I want to come out, but I don't want to come out and die.
We understand that. So what is the role of government? The role of government is to show that we should have the monopoly of use of force within this geography, right? And the government must show that they can deliver. And Soludo, for instance, in Anambra State has displayed that. Yeah. So before now, there was high risk in many parts of the state, and what in a very quiet, subtle way, they know what strategy they're implementing. But what we know is that from time to time, you see that certain terror cells have been broken. Some of the names, that you hear of have been arrested, and so on. So it tells you that there is some work going on. There might not be a lot of public noise around it, but there is some work going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. Nnamdi Kanu has come out to say, at least through his lawyer.
Correct.
Please, guys, don't sit at home anymore.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. This is not for the interest of the East.
Exactly.
Yet, people are not listening to that. The other thing is that, who do you think are the gainers and the losers of the sit at home? Because for every issue, we have gainers and losers.
Correct.
As it were.
So, this is now very slippery territory that we're entering, right? Because you've got Nnamdi Kanu saying IPOB, as we understand it, is not behind the sit at home. But we've got Simon Ekpa in Finland, saying you must sit at home. So the question is, who is in charge? Is there some power tussle within, the IPOB world? And who stands to gain from this? I think what has happened in the region is there's been some cloud, some environment, atmosphere that has allowed for criminality, yeah? And those criminal elements benefit from this. Those are the ones who are gaining. Number two, there is a sense that some of the people who are projecting the Biafra nationalism argument may be getting some support from people who feel that this is a strategy to actualize the Biafran state. Support here means financial donations and so on. So if you stop the sit at home, maybe that donation pipeline would dry up, and that is why they want to continue to uphold the sit at home. However, it is in every situation, you've got the good guys and the bad guys. What we need now is for the governors and the government of the region, to basically step forward, chest out, and say, we're going to deal with this once and for all. One must commend them for having worked with the IPOB, at least as we understand it, under Nnamdi Kanu, to take this position that sit at home is cancelled. The rest of it is for anybody who tries to retain the sit at home to be seen as a criminal and dealt with as one.
What do you think that the FG has really behaved well in terms of handling of this? Because if we go back to history, the Boko Haram history, the other guy, is it Yusufu? Or yes, in Borno State and all of that. And you look at the trajectory. Nnamdi Kanu has been in detention since. The law courts have said, release this guy. Buhari's government did not release. Soludo has told Tinubu, please give me this guy. I will be his shortee. I will give him to you. There's also the school of thought, no, don't release him because of, and all of that. How do you think that the federal government under Tinubu should handle this situation? Because I have not even seen him come out to say anything, but a lot of people are saying, okay, this government has even started not obeying rule of law. Look at the Emefiele's case. For example, this is a central bank chief that his signature is on your currency, and you're going out saying that foreign investors should come in. Meanwhile, your CBN chief signs your money. You've charged him that he carries a gun. So all of those things, how does it really play out now for a Tinubu's administration to be able to handle this well? Bearing in mind that the Southeast, like I mentioned, is an economic zone, which Tinubu actually also said when he campaigned. I can't remember, was it about which states, which area did he go to? I said, I will make this place the Taiwan. So you recognize that, and yet this region is still suffering insecurity. So
I think even if we leave out the fact that the region drives some part of the economy, if we leave that out, right? If we leave that out and just focus on rule of law, right? You can't run a government, a nation as diverse as Nigeria if you do not have certain rules that are sacrosanct. Yeah, and one of them should be the rule of law. And if the law courts have said, release this guy, right? If I had an opportunity to sit with Tinubu, I would say to him, if you do this, not only will it win you a lot of support and goodwill, from a people, and any which way you look at it, you need a country where there's a semblance of unity, yeah? And even just on account of that, I would say releasing Nnamdi Kanu. And
this is a region that is already saying that even in your ministerial appointment, you are not being fair to us.
There's so many issues, and I don't want to get...
The social-political part of it.
There's so many of that, and, I don't want us to get sucked into that. But just to say, if we keep it on the rule of law level, and you say, okay, whether I agree with what the court said or not, for us to run a civil or a civilized society, we must respect our rules. So the court say release. In fact, if you want double shorty, get the governors of the region, to shorty that any day I want this guy, you're going to produce him, right? And I'm sure that to regain the days they lose on sit-at-home Monday, they will give the shorty, right? And once you release Nnamdi Kanu, then you kind of remove the argument that anybody would use in justifying. So
do you think that if Nnamdi Kanu is released by the federal government, the Monday sit-at-home will stop?
What else would be the argument for the Monday sit-at-home? The argument they laid forward is that we will keep sitting at home on Mondays until Nnamdi Kanu is released.
Because the government is not even seeing the gain of this analysis which you've just given, or the solution, as it were, because I wonder what the government is gauging, what the opportunity costs.
Maybe the question to ask is, what is government's fear?
Or what is government seeing that we are not seeing? Or what information is government have that we don't have, right? And because one part of our business focuses on security and conflict, we think about these issues, we've looked at different aspects of it. I am not sure that there is anything they're seeing that we have not seen. Okay.
Except maybe some political considerations, right? And political considerations are real, yeah? But even those political considerations, you can find a way to walk around. And that's what I'm saying. If you have the governors of the region saying that we're going to shorty this guy, we're going to shorty that we will find a way to ensure that, we stay within the ambit of the law, even as he continues to push his argument that the region should go for a referendum, etc. Let's even respect what the laws say. And then we get to all the other discussions.
Okay. Patrick, I think we'll leave it at that for today.
Yeah, excellent.
Because we've discussed at least the Niger Coup. We've also looked at the sit-at-home order, and that really, really pains my heart because we're talking of even Niger. Backdoor here, we have our own issues that we're grappling with. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me.
For coming, and I hope we'll talk sometime soon.
Yes, excellent.
All right, that's the much you can take. I've been speaking with Patrick Okigbo III, who's the founding partner at Next Year. We've been looking at the economics of Niger Coup and the sit-at-home order in the Southeast. There's a lot for Mr. President to do. I said it before the campaign, I don't even envy who the president will be. But I wish you all well. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye for now.